Everyone inside the MAGA orbit is tied to Donald Trump's efforts to keep the Epstein files out of view. All of them. Whether they're sitting close to the center of power or lingering on the edges, they are part of the same effort. And some of the people most deeply involved are the ones who least want to admit it. That became obvious tonight when a newly surfaced video highlighted J.D. Vance's previously unmentioned connection to Epstein, and he responded with a panicked, over-the-top post on Twitter. We're going to break that down, but before we do, if you could drop a like on this video and subscribe if you enjoy our coverage, it really does help support what we do. Now, before we get to the video that set off Vance and his online meltdown, I want to start with someone who hasn't backed down for a second when it comes to exposing the truth about the Epstein files. Representative Jasmine Crockett. Here's her latest.
The Department of Justice didn't have this information, and if they didn't have this information, do we know whether or not they actually deleted this information? Do we know that there was a thorough investigation? Do we know whether or not the investigation had concluded? These are all questions that we need answers to, but we can't get them when you're not cooperating. So we don't know what the DOJ has, nor what it is that the DOJ potentially was trying to do. Considering that the president right now is trying to obstruct on some very basics of let's just get a subpoena that says release all the information, I wouldn't be surprised, just like he obstructed the prosecution of one of his henchmen who took $50,000 in taxpayer dollars from undercover officers. I wouldn't be surprised if he sent a message and said, stop investigating. We're done with this. Epstein's dead. I don't want to hear anything else about it.
Do you have any evidence of that claim?
I have no idea. No, that's the whole point. I have no information. And that's why we need these files to be released, because we are looking for transparency, whether you're a Democrat, Republican, or independent. Listen, if people decide that they want to continue to support a person who may be a pedophile himself, or a person who obviously is covering for pedophiles, that's on them. But they should know at least the devil that they have decided to pick.
Very few Democrats have been as outspoken as Jasmine Crockett when it comes to exposing the ongoing Epstein cover-up. And her timing matters because Donald Trump has essentially vanished from the conversation. Yes, he held a press conference today where he claimed he would be working harder than anyone to protect vulnerable children. But that statement felt like one of the most glaring messaging missteps we've seen from this White House in a long time, which is saying a lot. And what about J.D. Vance? He's usually glued to Twitter, yet we've heard nothing. No posts, no comments, nothing. The silence is noticeable, especially because we already know there are unanswered questions regarding Vance's own proximity to the Epstein network, questions that haven't gotten nearly enough attention. But today, that changed. J.D. Vance himself ended up drawing attention to the issue after a video shared by Lawrence O'Donnell highlighted one of those lingering connections. The clip upset Vance enough that he jumped online to respond, and his reaction only raised more eyebrows. So let's look at the video Lawrence posted, Vance's response, and then take a closer look at what his connection actually is.
Gerald Ford said nothing about Richard Nixon as Nixon sank deeper into scandal, as Nixon, on his way to impeachment, which he only avoided by resigning the presidency. Gerald Ford said nothing because Gerald Ford knew that when he eventually took over the presidency, he didn't want the stain of Nixon on him. And so J.D. Vance is silent tonight. But what is J.D. Vance supposed to say tonight when he reads an email written by Jeffrey Epstein during the Trump presidency in 2019, 6 months before Jeffrey Epstein's second arrest, saying, quote, "Of course he knew about the girls," meaning Donald Trump. Donald Trump has always denied any involvement in or knowledge of Jeffrey Epstein's sex trafficking and raping of children. And the Washington Post is reporting that one of Jeffrey Epstein's emails says Donald Trump never got a massage. Donald Trump wasn't involved, according to this email. The email written by Jeffrey Epstein says Trump knew of it and came to my house many times during that period. Epstein wrote in an email to himself on February 1st, 2019, the Washington Post is reporting, several months before he was arrested on trafficking charges and killed himself in jail, he never got a massage. So there's Jeffrey Epstein himself letting Donald Trump off the hook on that point. But Donald Trump's always insisted he never knew anything that Jeffrey Epstein was up to. Never knew anything possibly illegal that Jeffrey Epstein was up to. What is J.D. Vance or Donald Trump or any Trump defender supposed to say tonight when they read an email from Jeffrey Epstein after the first criminal investigation of Jeffrey Epstein in Florida?
J.D. Vance responded to that video, that post of Lawrence O'Donnell writing on Twitter, "I did 2 media interviews literally today, one of which is airing in a few hours." A little defensive there. J.D., huh? A little defensive. Kind of jumping at the opportunity to try to clear his name. And why is that? Well, one, because I think overwhelmingly, in overwhelming numbers, we will see Republican members of Congress, and this is a shocker, but I really do think this is going to be the case, vote to release the Epstein files. And I think the same thing is going to happen in the House as it does the Senate. So where does that put J.D. Vance? It puts him in a tough spot because that's going to be his 2028 Republican primary competition. And we know that's all J.D. Vance thinks about is his political future. So J.D. can't come out and talk about the Epstein files, maybe in the way that he'd like to, but he also can't be seen as being on Donald Trump's bad side because that's whose endorsement he really needs in 2028. Of course, if Trump doesn't decide he wants to run again, illegally, mind you, but Vance really, maybe more than anyone else, needs to distance himself from this Epstein connection because someone who spent a lot of time with Jeffrey Epstein built J.D. Vance's political career. I'm talking about Peter Thiel. I want to dive into this all. Peter Thiel has been a crucial mentor, a significant financial backer, and a close ally of J.D. Vance, helping launch both his business and political careers. Thiel's support was instrumental in Vance rising from a venture capitalist to the current vice president of the United States. Mentorship and career foundation. Vance met Thiel while a student at Yale Law School in 2011. A meeting Vance called the most significant moment of his time there. Vance later worked at Thiel's venture capital firm, where he became a protege political kingmaker. Thiel was the single largest donor to Vance's 2022 Senate campaign, contributing a record-breaking $15 million to a super PAC, Protect Ohio Values, which largely funded Vance's successful run for the Senate. Thiel also helped recruit other major donors from Silicon Valley. So Peter Thiel really built J.D. Vance's entire political career. But who did Peter Thiel recently talk about spending a lot of time with? Well, you guessed it, Jeffrey Epstein.
I met Epstein a few times as well, and I think...
How'd you get introduced?
It was Reid Hoffman in Silicon Valley introduced us in 2014, but it was basically... and I didn't check, didn't ask enough questions about it. But I think there were sort of a lot of things where it was fraudulent. I do think Epstein knew a lot about taxes, and there were probably, these complicated ways you could structure a nonprofit organization, especially as a way in a marital context that I think Epstein might have known a decent amount about.
How, when you were introduced to him?
I don't think Epstein would have been able to, comment on superstring theory or something like that. Right. But I think this sort of thing he might have actually been pretty expert on.
None of this should really shock anyone. The ultra-wealthy often operate in the same circles, attending the same events, networking with the same people, showing off their excess, and building their own insulated world. That part is not new. What is interesting is how the modern Republican Party, which constantly claims to oppose elites, has built an entire political identity around a kind of pretend populism. J.D. Vance is a perfect example. A Silicon Valley-funded venture capitalist, a best-selling author whose book became a major film, a graduate of Yale Law School, and someone whose rise was financially backed by a billionaire who made his fortune in high-tech surveillance industries. Yet he presents himself as an outsider fighting the system. Sure. What makes it even more ironic is the way these self-declared populists condemn coastal elites and complain about concentrated wealth in places like Hollywood, New York, or San Francisco, all while voting for massive tax breaks that overwhelmingly benefit the richest individuals and corporations. They speak as if they are battling a powerful upper class, bringing ruin to the country, but then turn around and pass policies that hand those same wealthy interests billions more. And as they indulge in conspiracy theories about imaginary shadowy cabals, they simultaneously ignore well-documented abuses and wrongdoing involving actual wealthy networks. The kind that have been exposed through real investigations, not internet rumors. Instead of addressing that, they insist they are defending ordinary Americans while giving preferential treatment to the same elite circles they claim to oppose. That's why J.D. Vance's messaging feels so contradictory. Rather than confronting the tech billionaires who bankroll his political career, he looks for symbolic enemies, groups that are easier to target politically, even if they have far less power than the people who built his platform in the first place. Just listen to this clip.
Young people are saying housing is way too expensive. Why is that? Because we flooded the country with 30 million illegal immigrants who were taking houses that ought by right go to American citizens. And at the same time, we weren't building enough new houses to begin with, even for the population that we had. So what we're doing is trying to make it easier to build houses, trying to make it easier to build factories and things like that so that people have good jobs. We're also getting all of those illegal aliens out of our country, and you're already seeing it start to pay some dividends. Let me give you a very clear statistical example. Under the Biden administration, the price of a new home literally doubled in 4 years. It went up 100%. Under the Trump administration, housing and rent prices are up about 1 to 2%. That's actually in line with what you would like to see. So again, we inherited a disaster. We're very mindful of the fact that there's a lot of work to do, but I think that we've made great progress.
30 million. That's the number now. I didn't realize it had jumped to 30 million, considering Donald Trump previously claimed it was 20 million, then 25 million, and now 30 million. By the time J.D. Vance is running for president in 2028, while still criticizing Joe Biden for some reason, the number will probably be even higher. But that's not the real reason housing is so unaffordable. The true issue is that massive asset managers have been buying up single-family homes in bulk, keeping working-class Americans trapped as long-term renters. Then there's Donald Trump's proposed 50-year mortgage plan. How is that any different? Sure. Technically, you're not renting from a landlord, but the bank still owns the home, and paying for 50 years means you're essentially paying rent to a financial institution. Likely more than double the original value of the property. That's J.D. Vance's solution, alongside Donald Trump's. And part of their approach is to shift the blame to immigrants, not billionaires, not even distancing themselves from their own controversial associations, all while survivors continue to speak out, making it harder to ignore.
Really speak for themselves. You know, you read it and you have a very visceral reaction to them. But I do think they just speak for themselves. And I think survivors have been very clear and consistent about our messaging that anyone who performs harm or anybody that has done any wrongdoing or has harmed people should face accountability. They should be brought to justice. And I think that survivors are holding strong to that sentiment. And I think that the only way we're ever going to be able to do that is by releasing all of the files from the government.
Right, all of the files to see the names, and obviously to the extent that victims want their names out there, we know that there are hundreds of victims' names in there. There are also many men in there who participated, who knew, and they should be held to account.
Absolutely.
So we are learning that there was a major pressure campaign by the White House today. Now, we know there had been one for months. Trump said that anybody who would vote to release the files for that transparency, it's a hostile act to this administration. But today they invited Congresswoman Lauren Boebert to the Situation Room, an unprecedented meeting. The Attorney General there, the Deputy Attorney General there, the head of the FBI is there to try to get her to pull her signature from the petition today that moves this to a full vote on the House floor. What does it say to you that something like this would happen in the White House, in the Situation Room?
The host says that J.D. Vance can try to distance himself all he wants, but it won't work. According to the commentary, he remains tied to the controversy, and attempts to step away from it aren't going to succeed. The show says they'll keep highlighting his role and won't let the issue fade. If you want to support their coverage, they encourage you to subscribe, hit the like button, and drop a blue heart in the comments if you watched until the end. Keep pushing forward. Don't let anyone quiet your voice, and until next time, I will see you soon.